Okay, welcome everybody. We're here for the session with Ishaya Bako, and I'm really pleased that he joined us very early. He was here before most of us. Ishaya, thanks for being here, and let me know when you're ready to start so that we can start immediately.
Good afternoon, Stanley, and hi, everybody. First of all, thank you for the invite to filmmaking, and well done for all the work you and the Real Time Film Festival crew have done over the years. I think we could just probably start at 2:20, just give probably 4 minutes for anybody else that wants to join in.
Okay.
And then we'll start. But
okay.
Yeah, good to be here.
Okay. Yeah. So thanks everyone for joining. We're just waiting till 2:20 so that more people can join us. But Ishaya is already in the room, and at exactly 2:20 we'll be starting. This session is also streaming live on our website, so you can share the link with people to follow, and follow us on YouTube as well. Thanks. So for the benefit of those who are just joining us, we'll be starting in 2 minutes. We're just waiting to 2:20, so more people can join before we start. Ishaya is already in the room, so guys, just relax and bear with us. Okay, it's 2:20 and we're starting right now.
Great. So good afternoon again, everybody.
Good afternoon.
And yes, once again, happy to be here. Thank you again once more, Stanley, for inviting me to be part of the festival, and good work on you and your team and on how much you've done. So I'm going to be doing like just a quick, because obviously, like I feel like filmmaking in general is just a lifelong thing. And so just be doing like a quick overview of like and then hopefully just open it up for it to be a truly interactive session. I see some interesting people that I've worked with, and I admire their work a lot on the call. But yeah, I mean, like it's good, and we'll just start. So I suppose the first, can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So I suppose like the first thing is just why documentary? Like why do we make documentaries, or why do people want to get involved in making documentaries or documentary films? And I suppose like let me see, is it full screen now?
Yes, it is.
Great. And I suppose like it's obviously a form of expression, and it's a craft as well as an art. I put some images of some of the documentaries that people may have watched. If not, like I think these are interesting films that like people should watch. I think definitely every filmmaker should watch films more than anything else. Like I think it's important to see what's out there. It's important to see how people have expressed themselves, and how they've told stories. So why documentary? Because stories can be told in different formats. There are novels, non-fiction writing, plays, musical, news reports, articles, opinion pieces, oral folklore, fiction films. The question is, what makes documentaries unique? And I think for this, there are many different ways to define what a documentary is. I think over the years, and like reading a lot of people, watching a lot of people, and even just honing the craft of filmmaking itself, I think I've been able to like distill it down to these three, and then at the bottom is kind of what a documentary is not. So documentary is an act of communication. So first and foremost, it is something that you are not making for yourself; you're making for an audience, and you're making it in a very specific format or a very specific medium, which is if you're making a film. So whether you're making a documentary short, you're making a documentary feature, you're making a series, at the heart of it is that you're making it for an audience. You're not making it for yourself. I mean, there's nothing wrong with making it for yourself, but then I want to believe that if you are building a career in this, or if you're a filmmaker, you are making a film for an audience. Second thing a documentary is, it tells the truth. And it shows the evidence as well. Like, so it's one thing to just say, oh, this is what happened, or quote some random facts, but if you need to back it up with evidence. And that's kind of what also differentiates documentaries from fiction in particular. One of the things I like to say is that with a documentary, you're finding the story within truth, but with fiction, you're finding truth within the story. So if you're approaching a fiction film, like you're obviously creating characters from memory, from scratch, or even if it's inspired by something else, like. But talking about fiction, particularly, like biopics. But then if you're making a documentary, you're capturing real life. You're telling what is there, what exists. So, but you're also trying to pretty much articulate it, because you're creating a film, you're making a film. So you need to articulate it in the sense that, again, you're communicating to people. So you're making it, and it will come to the third point, which is that it makes a visual argument. Film is a visual medium, whether we like it or not. If when you say, oh, have you experienced the film, at the heart of it, you're watching it. As subject matter is telling it. So whether it is the life of someone you're talking about, you are actively selecting and editing. So you're obviously like researching it, you're writing it, you're editing it, so constructing. So you're creating a visual argument that you're going to communicate, that ultimately is telling the truth. In terms of objectivity and subjectivity, I feel like there's never an objective film. There's always a subjective approach, like, because you're looking at it through a lens where you're focusing your camera, how you're capturing a subject, how you're interviewing a subject, and how you're editing. What stays in the film and what stays out is a selective choice, and it takes away a certain level of objectivity, but then at the heart of it, there's still ethics to abide by. There's still ethics that you are telling the truth, that you're doing right by the story and by the subject matter. And what the documentary is not, and then the question is kind of like a difference between like a documentary and reality TV shows. I mean, like I think everybody knows over the last couple of, I suppose, probably a decade or two, reality TV has become ever more popular. I think Big Brother Nigeria is about to start again if it hasn't already started. And the arguments of documentary style, or it's documentary, but it's not, because the question you need to ask is, would any of this have happened if there wasn't a camera present? And that's also kind of what differentiates a documentary from a reality TV show. It's like, is any of this, if I didn't put a camera here, would these people act the way they do? Would they be doing this? Would they be saying this? Which is what documentary tries to explore. So even if it's obviously even semi-scripted, or you've done your proper planning in terms of how you want to approach a documentary, at the heart of it is you're capturing real life and you're capturing a truth. And I suppose that's what differentiates a documentary from reality TV. The second thing is a difference between documentary and news journalism. Now, the thing with news is that news happens present, and that's why it's called news, like it's present tense. Kind of similar to, I'm not sure in terms of the audience, like I want to believe there are a couple of filmmakers, but then if you're writing a treatment for a film, you're writing it in present tense because you're watching it as you go. The thing with documentary is always past tense, because you are, again, creating a visual argument, and you are creating a visual argument of what has happened, not kind of what is happening now. Obviously, like the interviews that you do, or you're capturing in real time, but then in terms of creating and crafting the story, you're doing it in terms of like, and that's the difference between like documentary and news journalism. You are exploring and examining what has already existed. Just talk quickly about the filmmaking process. Sorry, Stanley, I just want to ask, if people have questions, should we just wait till the end, or can people just pop in questions?
It depends on what you prefer. If the questions coming in between the session would not distract you, then we can have them that way. But if you would rather have them at the end of the day, then people can raise their hands to ask questions.
No, I'm fine either ways, to be honest. As long as I'm communicating.
Okay, good. So people can ask questions at any point in time. So once someone raises his hand, he has the floor.
Okay, good. That's fine. 1 second. So I only have like 4 people like on my thing. So if just in case anybody raises their hand and I don't respond to it, you can just let me know. So the filmmaking process is same with documentary as it is with fiction. I think one of the differences with documentary is that it's almost a continuous thing, and especially when you are crafting a story, because a lot of the story takes shape in the edit. A lot of the screenwriting takes shape in the edit as opposed to at the beginning. And so like with every filmmaking process, there's the pre-production, there's the production itself, and then there's post-production, and then the marketing and distribution. And documentary follows the same format. You have pre-production where you talk about development, which is like the story development, your research. Research is obviously very important, because if you remember again, documentary is telling truth. And that's kind of the backbone of it. If you lose truth, you lose all credibility with the documentary, and you lose what it is that you're trying to say. And if you lose credibility in the documentary, then or your film, then what's the purpose? So research, very important. Script writing. So oftentimes, like sometimes it's, especially if you're doing client work, it could be confusing to a client how a script can change from the beginning and the end. But then at the heart of it is, as I said, a lot of the story of a documentary takes shape in the edit. And this is because you don't know what you're going to get. Remember, you're capturing truth. So even when you say, okay, I'm going to interview so, so you're not telling them, you're not giving them a script to say this and this and this, because it becomes disingenuine. And So you can do a structure, and which is very, very important to do, especially in the pre-production stage, so that at least you start to formulate your ideas at the very beginning. You have to kind of give it a structure. If some people like working with mood boards or storyboards, some people have the treatments, some people have a script all written down. Whichever approach you use, as long as it is something that follows this process, it is fine. And obviously, as long as it's also takes the audience as well with a reasonable level of respect and dignity. And then obviously your subject selection as well, like your cast, who are the people that are going to talk and who are the voices that are going to be in this documentary. The next stage of the filmmaking is obviously you go out and shoot, which is mostly interviews. But then obviously you construct a narrative about the particular subject matter or the particular person as you go by, or with existing footage. There is, I think it's Asicapedia. I need to check that again, but there's this very interesting documentary filmmaker who's made biopics of some iconic people. He did the biopic of Ayrton Senna called Senna, and Amy Winehouse called Amy. And there's literally no interviews at all. It's literally just like found footage that like they edited. Was either won or was nominated for an Oscar for Best Documentary Feature. And then post-production. And then post-production here now is where you edit it. And as I said again, like this is also kind of another point where you write and you construct the narrative of the documentary. So once you've gone out into the field, you've captured all of this fun and interesting stuff, you've had these very interesting interviews, and you've gotten insights, and you now sit down and start to piece it together and start to construct it to see, okay, is this the story I wanted to tell? If it's not the story I wanted to tell, how can I like navigate through this? And like, remember what I said with documentary, it's kind of finding the story within the truth. So you have all of this truth, you have all of this, whether it's verite footage that you've captured, whether it's interviews that you've had, and you're now trying to construct the story. I'll answer you in a moment, Abuki. And whether it's finding that story within the truth. So whether cinema verite footage, whether the interviews that you've had, whether it's like even reenactments that you've done, is now how you're constructing that to kind of make form. Sometimes it's good practice, but then obviously resource is also a situation, is that you transcribe your interviews. So when you have interviews, you literally would write everything down like transcriptions. And this is normally done with research, where you like literally everything the person said, you write it down. Because this, if you use that process, you can almost do a paper edit. A paper edit is where you literally select the text or the narrative which becomes your dialogue. So if you have your interview, the dialogue or the responses now become the dialogue. So you select that and you like piece it together and you start to cut to that. And then whether or not you want to have a narrator and then a sound design, music composition, and then you now move into obviously your promotion, marketing, and direct and distribution. I mean, a lot of the filmmakers, and I remember also the early time of making film, like, and sometimes when this thing bites you, you know, you enter this one chance that you just love film, you love the process, and then we get very, very focused on the process of making the film, and we forget the process of actually taking that film to an audience. And both of them are equally as important. Like obviously a film is the story and how it's told, but then the marketing and distribution is pretty much how it's sold, and how you make it reach an audience. And in many ways, a film is not complete until it reaches an audience. So your marketing and distribution, your promotion, and in the next slide, I'll also show you like a slight variation of that for more social impact films. Okay, I'll take the question from Abuki.
All right, thank you, Ishaya. Recently, we went on location to do a documentary, and we found ourselves arguing with the DP on panning. He said it's unacceptable in documentary. That is number one. I don't know best practice, so I didn't want to assume that I knew. Panning.
Panning. What do you mean panning?
Yes.
When you say
Yeah,
panning,
like we had.
What do you mean
Yes,
plan?
to pan the camera from the subject to, yes.
He said it's
To pan the camera, for example, you have the subject stationed, and then you pan to pick something and come back to the subject. So the DP said it's not acceptable in documentary. That's the question number one. I don't know if it's clear. Then number two, at what time do you recommend that one scripts for narration? Some would say before you go to location for the documentary shoot. Some said when you return with the footage and begin to assemble, that gives you a better perspective to script for the narration. That is number two. So maybe later I'll come up with the third question.
Okay, that's good. What's your name, sir?
My name is Aboki or Prince Daniel. I'm joining from Kano.
Oh, okay. Thank you for your questions, Abuki. So your first question in terms of panning, that doesn't make much sense to me. And I feel like obviously like it's also like the DP obviously is the person that's in control of the visuals, but then the director also kind of sets the style and the tone. If it's a shot that is going to distract, if the DP says, okay, in the space, obviously, the DP can give advice and should give advice. So if a shot is going to distract or it's just arbitrary, then the DP definitely should advise that, oh, you shouldn't do that kind of pan. But to say you don't pan in because camera movements are a part of filmmaking, and your camera movements is a part of the style and is a part of what the direct what you're trying to show and place an audience. So yes, so to say it categorically you don't pan in a documentary is a patently false statement. You have all sorts of camera moves, whether you're going handheld, whether you want to use a dolly or a zoom, whatever it is that you want to do, as long as it's a consistent style, as long as it tells the story. If you remember what I said, like it's the visual arguments that you're making. As long as it tells the story, it's all valid. Everything, pretty much everything can go as long as it's enhancing the story and it's enhancing the construct of what it is that you're trying to say. The second question was about at what points in time do you write the narration? To be honest, you can write it at the beginning before you go out and shoot. You can do it after you shoot. What is important is that you're flexible about it, because like the danger you have if you write it before you go out and film is that by the time you come back, maybe what you've shot doesn't really match with what has been written. But the reverse can also be the case, where because you've written this narrative, you kind of know the kind of visuals, or you've written this narration, you know the kind of visuals that you want to go with it. Obviously, the longer the project the longer the film, the longer the project, the more complicated it would be. Then it would be more advisable to write it afterwards. But then, in many cases, it's dependent on the director or the producer in terms of the style that they're comfortable with. So either one is fine as long as, again, it's telling the story. But then obviously, like in the edits, you would need to be flexible because there are times when you'd have written something and you do not have the visuals to kind of back it up. And then that now becomes a situation. I hope I've answered the question, yes?
Yes, thank you. I think I should throw the third one if it is not too much.
No. Let's go a bit further and then you can throw the third one.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Okay, I'll note it down.
That's fine. So this is now, I'll not say the documentary filmmaking cycle, because with fiction, oftentimes you literally, because you have a script, you have literally everything listed out. You go out, you have actors, you've done it and you've shot, you go to the edit. It's a more linear process. With documentary, often you would find, especially again, the longer the project, is that you are doing it in cycle. Remember, as I just said now, in terms of when you're writing the script, so you can write a script in the beginning, or you should write a script in the beginning, because that way you're articulating your thoughts on what it is that you want to go out to get. You go out and you film, and then you start to edit. During your edits, very much likely you will now realize that, oh, I'm missing this, or I need this, it would be nice to have this, it would be nice to have that. And as I said, like you're also going to start writing your script again because now you have more information. You have new information that you did not know before when you went out to film. So you now start to construct it. So oftentimes you start to rewrite again. To your point, Abuki, is like for narration, you start to like tweak the narration here, tweak the narration there. You need to now go out again to go and shoot some more stuff. But there's a drone footage here. Maybe one of the subjects mentioned someone, and they're like, oh, this person would be good to have an interview with this person. So they tell their own side of the story. You need to go out again and shoot. And then again, your marketing and distribution, your promotion and distribution. With non-profit films, because like obviously with documentary and a significant amount of my own work has been in the non-profit sector or in the development sector. With non-profit films, it changes from marketing and distribution, although it is technically the same thing. It's like advocacy and dissemination. Because with these kind of films, there's usually a call to action, or usually there's something that you want the audience to do, which is the advocacy. And obviously you want the audience to know about the project or to know about the subject matter. So whether you're doing a documentary on, say, NSARS, you want people to know about it. I mean, it's already a topical issue itself, but then obviously you want people to know about it, and then you want people to probably do something about it, whether it's to know their reps more, to forge a more meaningful conversation with the police, or with the government in general, and that kind of thing. So yeah, with documentary filmmaking, often it's a cycle. And I'll just quickly go through like each of the stages, what you need to be thinking of and considering. So pre-production, as I mentioned earlier on, with film and with documentary, or with fiction and with documentary, it's pretty much really the same that you're thinking of, because this is now the planning stage, often the most important stage of any project. Because the better you plan, the less problems you encounter when you execute. And with filmmaking, and I'm sure Stanley will tell you, especially filmmaking in Nigeria, you need all the help you can get. Let's just put it that way. So in pre-production, you're thinking first the script, the concept note, the treatment, the general idea of what it is that you want to say. And often it's better to put this on paper. And as I said, you could use a storyboard as well, like the kind of images that you want to see. But then what that helps you do is that it creates a cogent narrative of what it is that you're trying to say, like what it is so whatever topic it is, whether you want to do a documentary about the oil sector or the education sector, or the power sector, even if you want to do a documentary about, say, Stanley and the Real-Time Film Festival, you need to now create, okay, so how does this start? What am I saying? What is the middle of it? How does this end? It helps you also articulate your thoughts first and foremost. More importantly, it helps you communicate with the people that you're going to be working with. So whether it's your DP, whether it is your editor, whether it's your sound person, or if you're having a narrator, the narrator, it helps you communicate this, because if you're able to share that document with them, they can ask the questions, or at least it's easier for you to have that kind of conversation. The research, as I said, research is very, 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 I cannot stress it enough. Research is very important. And in a sense too, documentary is a form of research, especially if you're having interviews, or you have a lot of interviews in the documentary. It is very, very important to research and to, I think I saw TJ Dan earlier on, he's done research on a few of my films. Like it's very important to like go through and like, what is the existing literature about this? What are the people that have expert knowledge of this subject matter or this person? What have they said about it? Because it gives you a more informed approach, and which is a very, very important thing to do when you're trying to tell the truth. The budget, obviously, you need to have an estimate of what it is that you're going to spend. Thankfully, documentary is less expensive to produce than fiction in some cases, not all cases, but in most cases, because you have a smaller crew size. But then it is just as prone to excess as film is, because with documentary, sometimes they're working on a documentary for years, they're working on it for 2-3 years. I think one of she spent about 6 years or 7 years making that film. It's a 90-minute film. And it's not uncommon to hear people do that kind of time and even more in just making a film. So obviously it's also prone to excess. It is also prone for you to overshoot your budget. But then if you're part of planning is obviously like your budgets and your schedule, like making sure that, okay, you accommodated for all of the different components that you're going to need, the type of equipment you're purchasing it or you're renting it, just making sure that you have that listed out in terms of food for your crew, for yourself. Most of the time you might not pay yourself because you just want to see your film made. But it's good practice to at least give something to yourself, because at the end of the day, you're a professional in this and you want to build a career in it. And then your crew and subject list, is good to have those details. And then your legal and financial documents. Now, with every kind of film, but also documentary in particular, it is very, very important to have your talent releases. So that is like a contract or at least a release that acknowledges that the person is doing this, or the person is granting you permission to use this or to broadcast this. And this is important, especially when you're talking to distributors. So if you're talking to big platforms, they will always ask you for the contracts that you had with your actors in particular, not necessarily crew, but actors or subject matters, because they are the ones that are appearing on screen, and they are the ones that can sue and say, oh, I didn't give my permission for you to make this document. Sure that your legal documents and financial documents are in order. And it's always important. I know sometimes you try to skimp on it, but then it's always important to always get legal advice, especially when you're coming to contracts to do. And then the principal photography, obviously, is the fun part of it, is where you go out and shoot. Yeah, and so in many cases with documentaries, the main things that you're doing are interviews and like the visual evidence. That's the B-rolls. So it's one thing for someone to say, oh, I own a factory of 10,000, and you're just seeing the person saying, no, I have a factory of 10,000 workers. However, if you now have the shots, like whether it's a drone shot going through the factory and you're seeing all the equipment and you're seeing the people, just the throng of people, again, you're watching it and you're seeing it. That is the visual evidence. Those are the B-rolls. And then reenactments too. There's certain narratives that would require that, especially if there's no like footage from the past or enough images from the past. So you might want to do reenactments, which is fine, as long as, again, it's telling the truth, or at least that perspective of the subject that has told you this truth. And very, very, very important, sound. Sound is extremely important because it is kind of the most distracting thing and annoying thing when you're watching a film. In many cases, people can forgive a bad shot or a bad image, but then if you have bad sound, you're not even communicating anymore. Like it really takes away from the experience of it. And then the post-production. I should add transcriptions to this, but then it's like you have your video edits, your sound, the color grading, audio mix, your narration. Transcriptions, as I earlier explained, is when you literally write down and you transcribe all of your interviews. And it's just very useful in terms of if you really want to know what someone is saying, if you have a 40-minute interview. You have a 40-minute interview, you do transcriptions of like 7 pages. It's far easier to flip through 7 pages to find what someone was talking about than going to go and play the video again and skipping and skipping and skipping. But then again, it's also resource intensive. So like it's working within the kind of reasonable budget that you have. So promotion, marketing, and distribution. So it's obviously important to know who your target audience is, what your promotion strategy is, what your distribution platforms and reach is as well. So your target audience is like, who is this film for? Like, why am I making this film? Many times it's just like, oh, everybody. But that's not very practical. And it's also not very practical by the time you start trying to raise money or raise finance for the film to be made. These are questions that your financiers are going to ask you. These are also questions that, especially if you start to talk to distributors, or they start to think of, okay, who is the main audience or who's the primary audience for this? How do we market or how do we promote to this? And that closely ties into your promotion strategy. Obviously, it's like, how am I going to utilize the narrative of this film? Why is it important? How am I going to tell like the audience that this is an important thing to watch and to spend your time watching? And obviously, like considering your distribution platforms and reach, and then how you measure kind of the success of your project going out. In the documentary space, it's not a new concept. It's impact producing. So impact producers are pretty much like you are making a film around a particular social issue or social cause, or at least someone that's doing something like around the social issue. And yeah, it's in those kind of subject areas or subject matters, like your promotion and marketing is not for a profit. You're not doing it and you're not selling it. But it's more for change, like for impact. Like you want people to do things differently. You want people to see things differently. Good series, and I'm sure people like, whether it's the Sex for Grades documentary or the Sweet Sweet Codeine, or even more recently the Ordinary Ahmed story. So impact producing is pretty much like, whether it's possibly most of the time, obviously, is raising awareness, like informing people of this or showing people a certain scope or a certain thing in a particular way, or a call to action, trying to get people to, first of all, obviously informing them, but also telling them on how to act. And there are different cases or subjects or case studies rather on that. And in that case, or in those fields, what is important there is your monitoring and evaluation and your theory of change. So your theory of change is, what is it that I'm trying to change? What is the situation, or what is the problem? It's almost like your problem definition. It's like, what is the problem? What is the situation I'm trying to change? What is the issue that I'm trying to address? And how do I want to change it, or how do I want to go about raising awareness around it? Excuse me. And then your monitoring and evaluation is literally creating indicators or creating markers for this change that you want to see. So say you want to, for an example, Nigeria is #1 in terms of open defecation in the world, even more than India now. And you want to create a documentary that's showing this and saying, okay, look, we need to stop doing our business outside, whether it's a cultural thing, whether our forefathers have been doing it since. This presents real health risks and also just a bad image for the country. So you start to break it down, like, okay, how do I want to reach people? Who are the target area, or who are the target markets for the people that I want to reach in particular? Is it in urban areas? Is it in rural areas? Where do they consume most of their entertainment? Are they more interested in skits, and is it possible that I break my documentary? So even if I have a 30-minute documentary, can I break it down into two-minute documentaries or two-minute skits that can draw their interest to watch the main documentary? And yeah, so it's all of this that you kind of break down, and then it's for your monitoring, like your monitoring and evaluation. Again, promotion and marketing. And evaluation is kind of tracking your instances of progress to say, okay, this is what I've done. This is how many people I've been able to reach. This is what I've been able. And yes, I think this is really the end of the slide. As I said, it's just going to be a short, quick breeze through like just the documentary process, and then now as many questions as we can take now, so we can just make this quite interactive. So the useful resources, the Studio Binder. Studio Binder is a project production management site, and it has like a lot of like sample forms, budgets you can use. They're like articles that the articles that you can read that just tells you some more about like just the filmmaking process and how to, so whether it's like in terms of contracts, in terms of planning your production and planning your shoots, it's a useful resource. No film school. I'm sure a lot of like DOPs or directors know this because it does more filmmaking tips and tricks. So it's more for directors and cinematographers or videographers. The International Documentary Association is literally all things documentary film. So it kind of promotes documentaries and their filmmakers. There are also useful resources for it. There's a membership subscription fee on it, but it depends on like how much you want, how deep you want to go into documentary filmmaking. But it's always, they have a lot of free resources there as well, and it's a very useful resource. And then the last one is the Impact Producers Field Guide, which is on impact producing, which is what I mentioned in the last slide in terms of impact producing. So yes, that is this quick spiel on documentary filmmaking, and yeah, it'd be good to just have a quick conversation now.
I think Abuki can ask his third question now.
Okay, thank you very much, Stanley. Thank you, Ishaya. I think it's been addressed. I wanted to ask about reenactment because that also was a challenge for us at some point. But the key point where my question was addressed, you said reenactment as long as it was on the fact.
Yes.
So that has addressed it. Because someone tried to make us think that reenactment brings in the element of fiction into what is supposed to be the true position. So I think it's been addressed. Thank you.
Prince Daniel, I see there.
Sir?
Yeah, this is me, sir. Thank you, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I think sorry, I can't see your name. But there's a lady, I think it was Chinyere that's raised her hand. You can ask your question, please.
Okay, yes, thank you for conditions or you deal to make for me. Did you get my question?
No, I didn't get your question. I'm struggling to hear you. I don't know if it's my own connection or is yours.
I think it's hers.
Okay, because I'm really struggling to hear you. Maybe you can type it in the chat. You can type it in the chat.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, let me. Okay, so I was saying, my question has to do with the path of the law, because when one is getting to do a documentary, I believe that you also have to consider whatever regulations or rules that are existing. So understanding that documentaries are supposed to cause you to are supposed to like incite conversations, influence change, provoke something in people. How do you deal with that, as in having to consider or comply with existing laws, and possibly laws that are actually very strict? Don't you think it will make you compromise, as in the verite form that a documentary is meant to be?
Ishaya, are you still there?
I'm still here, yes. I'm just trying to understand. So,
hello?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Hello, Ishaya.
Yes, I can hear you.
Stanley, can you hear me? I can hear you. I can hear you well. Sorry, can you ask?
Yes, please.
Your question is the law makes it restrictive for you. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying that it makes I'm not saying that it makes it restrictive for me. I'm saying, okay, before I have read and I have learned that before getting to do a documentary too, that you're also supposed to take into consideration, as in laws that are existing, maybe in a particular place, with regard to a documentary that you're making. So I'm like, if you are supposed to do that and there are stringent laws, for instance, don't you think that because you do not want to get into trouble and you know you have to comply with some of these laws, it will make you compromise on the story you want to tell us for with your documentary? Do you understand my question now?
I understand your question, but then
Okay.
I feel like obviously like we live in a society that, and this is also one of the reasons why documentary film. You know, if there's a certain injustice that's being done, or if and that's the thing about some laws, like if a law needs to be changed, um, make a visual argument on why the law. Like I don't think laws are necessarily a barrier. I mean, like there are always going to be barriers to any sort of project, any sort of endeavor, any sort of filmmaking. And laws obviously exist for a reason, because if not, we don't have a civilized society or a civil society. And I think obviously like documentary and has been and continues to be a very useful tool to kind of get justice, to show an injustice, to rally people around this particular injustice and is a wrong law. It's a documentary can be a visual argument against that. Now that said, laws exist. And it's also very important for the filmmaker to be responsible in what it is that they're actually saying. And that's something that there's always kind of a push and pull in terms of that, as in like, okay, I want to be entertaining, I want to be evocative, but then there's a point in time that you cross the line from I want to create something that's engaging and evocative to you're saying something that is either insulting to a particular group of people or insensitive to the subject matter itself. So say, for example, you're doing a documentary or you're making a film about persons with disabilities. You have to be conscious of the fact that in talking about this subject matter and approaching the subject matter, you need to be responsible in how you treat your subjects, but also how you present that to the audience so that you're not reinforcing negative stereotypes. You're not being like, you're not being controversial for controversial sake. You're actually making a strong visual argument that is based on truth. So, in regards to your question, like you can challenge laws, and that's why, like, especially at least thankfully we're in a pseudo democracy, but that's a different argument. And that's why, like, you can make amendments to laws, or at least they can rally around. For example, there was the Violence Against Persons bill that took 14 years since it was presented at the floor of the National Assembly. It took 14 years for it to be passed. And I actually made a documentary about relating to gender-based violence, but then it also kind of had an argument around that in terms of why would it take this long to adopt a bill that obviously has this kind of benefits to people. But again, as I said, like, it's that you should challenge laws doesn't mean that you should be irresponsible at the way you do that. I think that's an important point, I think, to make.
Yes, I get you. Thank you.
Yes. Mr. Tunde Akinlulu. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Shire. My question is this: what's been your personal experience in the Nigerian space concerning documentary filmmaking? Vis-a-vis, how has your documentary?
Can you? I lost you for a second. Can you just start again?
Oh, okay, yes. I was asking what your personal experience has been like in making documentary in Nigeria. and how the Nigerian environment, how it has affected your style of documentary filmmaking. And what advice will you give to upcoming documentary filmmakers, especially those who actually want to break the glass ceiling, some of these conversations that we've somehow not wanted to have in Nigeria? And what kind of advice will you give to people like us that want to talk, especially about very sensitive social issues?
Let's see. Very interesting question. Thank you, Tunde, for. I feel like I'm about to do high jump. So my own personal experience. I mean, interestingly enough, the first documentary, and I suppose it slightly ties into Chinyeri's last. The first documentary I did is a documentary called Fueling Poverty, and it's about the oil subsidy scam and the Occupy Niger protests of 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And
It was banned.
Ended up being banned at the time.
Banned, yeah.
So, I mean, that experience in itself was interesting, and it was, I suppose, like also like an important realization of how important documentaries are. More than even trying to shed light on an issue, it's always going to be there for posterity, and that's something that we don't do a lot of in Africa in general, but also Nigeria in particular. We do not document a lot. That's why our museums are the way they are in particular. That's why we do, like, in terms of even keeping our artifacts, we're still severely lacking in that. I mean, excuse me, thankfully, there are a lot of creatives, but a lot of like also just progressives that are doing very important and very interesting work in terms of creating a proper archive or creating a system for archives. But documentaries are also very good in terms of that, in terms of capturing archives. And so back to answer your question, my experience in making documentary, I mean, it's easy to fall, and I think I in a certain way I fell into the trap of like almost like trying to comment on every social issue and just slowly and surely fall into depression because problem no dey finish for Naija now. So like in many ways, like it's easy to fall into that gap. But then if I were to advise anybody that doing a documentary is in talking about or in commenting on the negative, is also very important to figure out how or where there's a positivity there, or where hope lies, because yes, in certain ways we've sold hope in certain disingenuous manners, but then if you're able to create that visual argument that kind of sees people beyond labels, beyond labels, or beyond a particular social issue to kind of what it can be, I think that's an interesting thing. Not to say that doing a documentary on a particular injustice is not important. I think it's incredibly important and incredibly vital. But then in for our environment as well, it's just easy to really like just be sad all the time just because of all the many different issues that we have. So in terms of for young filmmakers, or for people that are trying to start out or start a career in documentary, be wary, not be wary, understand that this thing takes time, especially if you want to tell a good story. It often takes time, and it might take a lot longer than you imagine. It is incredibly rewarding, which is a good thing about it. And being a documentary filmmaker, one of the joys about it is that you get to explore very different subject matters depending on the project that you have. Trust the process. Trust the process and trust yourself. Trust yourself that you have something to say, and what you want to say is important. And then trust the process that you are articulating your thoughts and you're going out to search for the truth, and then you're also crafting a story that is relevant, that makes sense, and that puts a very solid visual argument in front of an audience. It's a difficult road to to go, and it's a different for documentary filmmakers worldwide. It's a difficult world. There's no money in it. You won't see any documentaries in cinemas. Thankfully, like there's Netflix and a couple of other platforms that are giving space and platforms for documentary film. It's a tough. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's a tough career choice to make, but ultimately rewarding in its own way, and rewarding with every form of like creative expression, rewarding in terms of telling the necessary stories, and having it there for posterity. I'll keep on hammering on that, and having it there for posterity, because if we don't tell our stories, often like they will come and tell our story for us. And it's important that as we're living now in this time, in this moment, films or the kind of stories that we're capturing, they stay on forever. So when your children, your grandchildren are trying to figure out, oh, what was Nigeria like in I suppose like 2012, for example, they can watch a film like Fueling Poverty. You want to talk about like what are area boys like, a film like Our Own Boys, or even like music and the music culture in Nigeria, you can watch a film like Faji Agba. And there are all of these other different examples. And it also helps that, okay, when you need archive material later on, and I suppose like this is the part to also to think about in terms of like that progression, like, because in the course of doing the documentary, you are capturing a lot of images and a lot of different styled images. And these are things that you can license in the future, because like as it ages, it becomes, and especially if you really keep your archives well, as it ages, it becomes to a certain extent more and more valuable, because you're capturing that moment in time. And so even to that point, and it's something I didn't mention in terms of post-production, how you store and you file is very, very important. Like how you organize your files, so your video files, your audio files, your rushes, pretty much. It's very, very important. It's very, very important to back up. I know hard drives are far better for you to buy a 70,000 naira hard, or two 70,000 naira hard drive, or 470,000 naira hard drives, than for you to just buy the one and not have a backup. And then you go out and you spend hundreds of thousands, even millions to shoot a film, and then you lose it because you didn't want to just spend extra money on buying backup in case the drive fails, or in case your project becomes corrupted. So it's very, very important in terms of in terms of backing up your footage, incredibly important. Like hard drives, yes, they're expensive, but then what it is that you've captured is way more valuable. Way, way more valuable. That it's an expense that you should definitely have.
Thank you very much, sir.
Sorry, Faustina, before you said, Tunde, I've answered your question, yes?
Yes, you did. Thank you so very much.
No problem. Faustina?
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Good afternoon. How are you?
Okay, good afternoon. I'm fine. Thank you so much for this very insightful session. For me, as an upcoming, yet to be documentary filmmaker, this has really helped a lot. But I also I would love to know sites where I can find Nigerian documentaries, because the documentaries you just mentioned, many of them I've never heard of them, and I don't know where to find them. And I know it's wise for me to watch how this thing has been done before. So I don't know. I think I know of Our Boys just on Netflix, and then Skin, and Journey of an African Colony. I've watched those ones, but I don't know if there's a site where we can find Nigerian documentaries where we can find. And two, about grants. I know that there are grants for documentary filmmakers, especially international grants. I've checked some online, and I know that what I found is quite limiting. But if there's a platform for grants that you know of that you can actually let us know, about. I think it would be really helpful. And my final question is on monetization. So I said I'm an upcoming documentary filmmaker and I want to make a documentary. And when I spoke to someone, the first thing he said was, how do you plan to monetize it? And for me, I was like, I don't know. And he said, you have to know how to monetize if you're going to get investors, because nobody will want to invest in. It's not a charity organization. Let me use that word. It's not a charity project that anybody that I'm calling in as an investor will want to know how to monetize. So I don't know if there's a way that documentaries are monetized. That's all I have to ask. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your questions, Faustina. I think, so just remind me, your first question was on
where I can find Nigerian documentaries.
Okay, so I mean, like, there is I've put a link in the chat, afridocs.net, which is just a great site, which has like useful documentaries from across the continent, not just Nigeria.
All right.
The BBC Africa Eye documentaries are on YouTube. You search them on YouTube. I think they're more, as you mentioned, like Our Boys, Journey of an African Colony, Marked, Skin. They're more Nigerian documentaries on Netflix as well, which is quite good. There's the is like
there's what?
IREP.
Okay.
Film Festival. It happens every year in March in Freedom Park in Lagos. And I think Stanley, help me out here, but I also Ogajaman on the call as well. I think they also have like weekly or monthly screenings.
Yes, at the Freedom Park, yes.
So that's also a community, and if you want to be an aspiring documentary filmmaker, that's a community.
Sorry, I didn't get the name of the documentary of the monthly screening you mentioned.
Let me just put it on the chat. There's the IREP Film Festival. So there's a documentary particularly focused on documentary.
All right.
So there's that. So you can find the documentaries on YouTube and Netflix. To be honest, like there are documentaries.
Yeah, I think I've seen almost every Nigerian documentary on Netflix.
Yes.
I was just asking because of the ones that you mentioned that I have not found on Netflix. That's what I was asking.
Which one in particular?
Which one in particular?
Yes, that I mentioned, because the ones I mentioned are also the ones on Netflix.
You mentioned Sweet Coding.
Oh, that's the BBC Africa Eye. It's on YouTube.
Oh, okay. You mentioned Faji Agba and Ordinary Ahmed. All right, I'll find them.
The Faji Agba. So the Ordinary Ahmed documentary, I said, that's also part of the BBC Africa Eye series. So there's on YouTube, and you just type in BBC Africa Eye. You will see like I think there've been like 4 or 5 documentaries on Nigeria, but there are also documentaries in Kenya, there are documentaries in South Africa, and there are various social issues. There are various social issues and like very, very interesting subjects as well. Yes, Faji Agba, has refused to release it wide. But this is also the thing. So now coming into your question about monetizing, but this is also just the thing about independent productions and independent producers, because it's also part of the reason why you don't see, because the ratio of documentary films to even just normal fiction films obviously is incredible.
It's very wide.
Yeah, it's very wide. And understandably so. There's an argument that is made that documentary films are not popular, but I feel like it's also because we haven't made enough good ones. And as you would see, even the few that are available, they're always very insightful, and they're always like they reach an audience, and it's interesting and engaging. Would you ever reach an audience in the scale of big feature films? I don't even think it necessarily needs to aspire to that. I feel like it just is to make the best possible film that you can make. When it comes to raising finance for documentaries, now that's, as with film, it's always going to be a difficult thing. There are thankfully more channels available now, or at least more platforms rather available now, but then it's also how you're going to construct the story. So with grants, and I think what I would do is I would put I'll just copy and paste it in the chat. But the last, and I'll probably just share my screen again. The last slide that I had has like a lot of resources, and I've just put it on. I've just shared it now. It has a lot of resources that for what you asked for. Like for example, in terms of grants, the International Documentary IDA website has information on that. The Impact Field Producers Guide as well has information on grants.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, like it's those. If you go through those sites, there is that information. There's the information there, and if you just search, if you search the various websites, if you search for grants, and it's also very good to know who the grant makers are. So which of the organizations or which of the NGOs or CSOs are giving grants. What is their programmatic interest? Because most of the time they are particular about a particular subject matter.
Okay.
It's good to be conscious of that, and conscious of how the process, because sometimes that process takes time. Many times that process takes time. But then really and truly financing film in general, most of the time will take time, especially if you're aspiring for a certain kind of film or a certain audience or a certain like worldwide access or the kind of partners that you'll be involved with. But there are more and more creative ways of raising finance now. Secure ways to go through, and what happens is that the grant making process or applying yourself to the rigors of that, because when you're applying for grants, you need to fill out like a lot of or answer a lot of questions. But what that helps you do is that it helps you articulate your thoughts around what it is, like why two things. Why is this documentary needed? And why are you the best person to make this documentary? And it's a question that generally all filmmakers should ask themselves constantly. Why does this film need to be made? And why are you the best person to make this film? Because the more you're able to answer that, the more likely you are to make a successful film. Yeah.
So Ishaya, I'd like to invite Mohammed Omar. He's in the room.
Oh, Mohammed, I just saw his message now. Hi, Mohammed.
Okay. You know, Mohammed, since you were talking about grants and all of that, we were together last month, the African Vision. So Mohammed, if you just want to say something about what was just discussed just now, thanks.
Okay, hi Stanley, hi everybody, hi Ishaya. So yes, when talking about grants, I think what Ishaya just said now, it's very important is grant makers like ourselves, Documentary Africa, what we're looking at is basically the same as all international grant makers. We're looking at artistic approach. We're looking at, like he just said, a double necessity, the necessity to make this film. Why is it necessary? And the second necessity, why are you the best person to make that film? We're also looking at a third necessity, which is how you're going to make the film, how you're going to tell the story, because most of the time, aspiring documentary filmmakers tend to forget that documentary is also an art form. And just like fiction, it's not because you're making a documentary that you can't really work on the artistic side of it. It's as important as in fiction. So how are you going to make that film? How are you going to tell us the story? And also something that's really missing lots of the application we're receiving, the research part. When you're making a documentary, you obviously have a protagonist or have a subject matter, a topic, and you need to do research. And one thing that's really missing on the continent, and is most of the documentary filmmakers don't take the time to do the proper research. Because one thing you need to understand is when you're making a documentary, the amount of research you have to do, you're going to use maybe 10 to 15, or maybe at the best 20% of the research that you've made. But that research, when it comes to your protagonist, to the subject matter, to the city, to the locations, to the problematics, that will help you when you're in the editing room to articulate and to create the storyline. And that's very important. And the development phase is as much important as in fiction. So sometimes it's best to take your time to do proper research on the subject matter, on the topic, and on the protagonist, spend time with them, and then to gather as much information as material as you can. Then you can cut inside that material. It's always better to have more than not enough. And the research part, this is also what makes a difference. When we're reading applications, we can straight away know if the filmmaker has done his research and has done proper research. And because it's only when you're doing your research that you can articulate your point of view. And most international funders, if you go into the international stage, I would say Hot Docs for the Canadian Blue Ice Fund, Sundance or ITFA in Europe, or Documentary Africa Us in Nairobi, or whoever you're asking, they were going to look at the research part of the film and how you're going to articulate your point of view with all the material that you've gathered, and that's very important. Artistic approach, how you're going to tell the story, research, so the knowledge and expertise you have on the topic. Those are very important because if you go on a global stage, you're competing with countries that have real documentary history. They know how to make documentaries, they know how to produce them, they know how to work and to do impact with them. So basically you're going to a stage where there's a history of documentary filmmaking on a global stage. So you're competing with those filmmakers in the Western world or in the global South. So if you don't do your research, I insist a lot when I'm talking, the research part is very important.
So Ishaya, back to you. Thanks, Mohammed.
Yeah, thank you, Mohammed, and I definitely echo that, and I did mention that earlier on. But yes, it's as he mentioned, like it's absolutely important, the research part. And I think also for documentary filmmakers, like one thing to realize is that the research part of the documentary also includes going out to film, going out to actually be in contact with your subject matter, your protagonist, in their space. Like it's part of what informs it, because oftentimes we just sit down with Google in your room and then, oh, you're just reading all of these articles, but that's not enough. Oftentimes, and especially in terms of even how you want to approach it, from a visual point of view, it's always very important to go out there and to capture it, go out there and talk to your subjects, relate with them, and understand, ask those questions and continue asking those questions to get yourself really informed about the subject and the subject matter. Yes, Esther, Kemi.
Okay, thank you for the information that we have gotten. It's really helped, very encouraging. I started out by making documentaries. Documentaries were like one of the first films, that I started my filmmaking, career, like serious film. and but the concern I have is this. I think 2018, I made a documentary. Once I was done, I sent them to festivals. They did pretty. The documentary did pretty well at festivals. You know, got a couple of awards. Here, there, best documentary and all that. And then then I got some VODs, like some of these foreign VODs that you have, like that. But then ever since I've not known what to do with it. I've not released it. It just went with the festivals, quite all right. Probably the most successful film I've done, in terms of, international attention. But it was funny enough, it was also on IREP. It was selected on IREP by the IREP, the one in Nigeria, yes, and all that. So it's done pretty well. But then, right now it's in my hard disk. I'm trying to figure out. I don't even know if it would I could push it out to, some maybe Netflix or something, but basically it's just there, nothing much, so this is like practical experience. So it's not encouraged me to, I have like 2 documentaries, in the works, that I've been doing research for years, because most of the documentaries I do are basically issues that have bothered me over the years, but then I'm not eager to like finish them, because I'm like, okay, once I'm done, what next? So I probably would like you to, put a word there and see if there's any way forward, because yeah, I know that funny enough, the intention has never really been some heavy profit here, there, but at least get your stuff out there, that kind of thing. It would make a whole lot of sense, so that's my question. Yeah.
So just so I have proper context, are you a producer, a director, are you both? Like,
yeah, both producer, director.
Yeah. Worked on the film as a producer.
Sorry?
So you worked on the film as a producer?
Both producer, director.
Okay. I mean, like, again, to be fair, like, it's, and this is not to discourage anyone, but then it is a difficult space, particularly for documentary, and documentary in Nigeria, but in Africa too. But then if you've sent it out to festivals, and that's also the purpose of festivals, is that you meet people. So you meet sales agents, you meet financiers, you meet other producers. And as a producer, your work is to network with these people. So whether it's the festival organizers, whether to even just say, oh, look, who are the sales agents I should be talking to about my film? And if your film has even won awards in these festivals, and to be fair, there are films that have critical success that struggle to find a sales agent. But then these platforms, this is kind of where why these platforms exist. Like with the festivals, is like, talk to a sales agent, can I talk to a distributor, put me in the room with that, and see the kind of offers that can be given. I think it's I think that's kind of a good place to actually start. Like, festivals that you've been through, whether their program would have like the list of attendees that are there. And it's not always just for the filmmakers that are there. They're the buyers, they're the sales agents. And yes, so, and Mohammed?
Yeah, Mohammed has something to say. Could you unmute your mic, please, Mohammed?
Okay. Yeah, maybe to complete what Ishaya just said, when it comes to documentary, there's 2 ways where you can probably trying to exploit the film is when you're starting your production strategy, you have to pre-sell it to broadcasters, international broadcasters. That's the first thing you try to do. You pre-sell the film. For example, I'm just giving you a concrete example. My latest film I wouldn't started it if I didn't have at least 2 or 3 pre-sales with international broadcasters. But that's the producer's work. That's totally different. That's why Ishaya asked you the question is, are you a producer or a filmmaker on this? Because as a producer, the work of the producer, just like in fiction, is to pre-sell the films if it's a feature film. If it's animation, documentary, fiction, you have to pre-sell it to broadcasters. And broadcasters are all over the place, depending on the theme of the documentary, depending if you know the commissioning editors, depending if you go on the international broadcasters, they are in the market. So documentary film markets, it's a sunny side of the dock. If you're in Europe, that's in France in June. You go to ITFA, that's in Rotterdam in October or November. You go to Hot Docs, that's in April in Canada. Those are the main market where you're going to pitch your projects to broadcasters. You know, that's the main market. You go to Sheffield in the UK, they got a market there. Broadcasters come to those markets for documentary product, for documentary content. If you're trying to, so the first road, if it goes as planned, you sell it to broadcasters. Then you know exactly that you can have some return when you finish the documentary. If you didn't manage to sell it to broadcasters like Ishaya told you, then you're going to have to go to festivals, big festivals, trying to get buyers, trying to get sales agents, trying to get distributors, and trying to strike some memo deal with them so you can manage for them. They will be able to target buyers, TV, whoever, and they're trying to sell your film. But that has nothing to do with the filmmaker's job. That's a producer's job, you know. And then the third solution, if you didn't pre-sell, you don't have buyers, you just have to open your book, your network, and do like almost by one-to-one, trying to get to the commissioning editors of the millions of TV worldwide. You have to understand that that's a paradox. Documentary, you can sell it much more easier than fiction. If you look at the millions of TV and broadcasters all over the planet, they're all looking for content. Most of the contents are TV shows and documentaries or sports shows, wherever. So basically, you're going to have to pre-sell it. If it's a feature film, it's pre-sell it. So if you're going to pre-sell documentary to BBC World or to Al Jazeera, Africa Direct, it's not the same as you're going to sell it to the French-speaking channel TV5 Monde or whoever, or POV in the United States. They have a certain agenda, they have a certain editorial line. So you have to understand what kind of editorial line. So if your documentary can fit in that. Or are you as a filmmaker being able to work under that editorial line with your artistic approach? So it's almost the work has to be done before you even start shooting, just like for any feature film. So, and you have to be in the market where the documentary buyers are. So I can repeat the market. So you have sunny side of the dock. It's in La Rochelle in France, west of France. You have ITFA, that's the International Documentary Film Festival in Amsterdam. That's in November. That's where you also have a big market there. You have Sheffield. Sheffield is in the UK. I think it's in June. You have Hot Docs. It's in Canada. There's a huge market there. It's in April. Those are the markets. If you have documentary projects, you should go and try to pitch to broadcasters. Mostly it's not filmmakers, it's the producers. Or if you have a producer, you go with your producer and try to pitch that for pre-sales.
Mohammed, does encounters still happen?
Encounters does happen. I mean, we at Documentary Africa, we worked with them last June, but unfortunately, they don't have enough money now to have to do a market. But you can do the Durban Film Mart. Unfortunately, with the events in South Africa, the Durban Film Mart is going to be happening in August. They postponed it because of civil unrest. But at the Durban Film Mart, you also have a couple of broadcasters, but you don't have as much as Sunny Side of the Dark or ITFA.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Thank you.
Okay, so based on what you said, because when you talked about the festivals, the film did well at documentary festivals as well. You know, um, you know, all over the place. If we didn't have awards, we had official selections, even in very difficult festivals. But then maybe because I was new, and it was a first major film that I sent to festivals. I obviously didn't know what to do with, all of that. So now obviously I think I finished it in 2018. Are you suggesting I go that route again? Like, because I know it's obviously not too late, to still put it on festivals that we haven't gone, to, that could be an approach, or I should just go the route that you said, I should just do one-on-one with international broadcasters and see, because obviously I didn't do a pre-sale. I obviously didn't even know about the pre-sale, that I could actually talk about it with, it was something, it was something that bothered me and I wanted to document. And the documentary actually came out of, I had done a couple of documentaries earlier, that I felt, the same issue that Nigerians didn't engage, with documentaries very well. So I was very worried about it, that if I kept doing documentaries, I would, I wouldn't be able to have any engagement. So I did a bit of a twist in this particular documentary. I did a reconstruction. So after going to the communities and doing as much research as possible, I built the story. So I had sort of like live action, film still within the community. So you have, drama, as well as documentary. So I was, because I know drama always has engagement, good drama, so I blended the two with the interviews and everything. Just, it was something experimental for me because I had been thinking about how do I get more engagement for documentary. So when I submitted it for festivals, the response was probably better than I expected, because I didn't know how it would be taken, that kind of thing. But now, I'm hoping that, the case isn't hopeless. Like, I didn't have a pre-sale. I don't know any international broadcasters, but I know obviously I can get their contact and try to reach out to them, probably by email or phone calls. So what do you suggest? Because I actually need practical solutions. If I'm going to continue down this route, I have documentaries, that I'm currently working on. You understand? If I'm going to finish them, I would need, something concrete to be able to work with. Yeah. Thanks.
I think some links have been dropped. Some festivals have been written in the chat box. I think if you can take those ones and just begin to check them out, and if your work is not so old and still relevant, you can just try it again and pretend as if you just made it and see how it goes.
I will also suggest that sometimes it's good to, if you filmmaker producer, even if you're doing the producing side, if you want to produce your film, which is good because you own the rights, you have some power on the copyright issues and everything, which is something that it's important for us on the continent. But it always good to have like some people working on the production side, so they can do all this administrative work of trying to get pre-sales, working with trying to get the buyers, the sales agent, trying to lobby with the markets, in the markets, trying to get all that work, because this is like a daily job trying to sell a film. And sometimes when you're a filmmaker and a producer, it's difficult to do that, if you're trying to do both. So my suggestion is, if you do have a team, a production team, trying to get somebody to do that work, but that's really a daily job to trying to sell your film, especially if you're coming from our continent. The other solution is trying to get a co-producer that can open doors in different countries with broadcasters. Then maybe that's also another solution for your future projects. Because it's also, co-producer can open doors to market. If you get a South African co-producer, maybe the co-producer can bring in, is the SABC, for example. Or if you got a co-producer in Canada, maybe the co-producer can bring in ONF or whoever. So sometimes it's also interesting to work that way with co-producers, because the production part, to sell a film is like a daily job, really. And you can't sometimes do both. What I do, as when I do a documentary, I get some people working on the production side, even if I co-produce. And I always try to get a co-producer so that can open doors to at least one market or another market.
Yes. Thank you again, Mohammed. And I think again, Kemi, I think it's a situation where you need to know your audience. Who is the audience? Who are the people that you want? And I suppose that also would guide you in terms of the distributors that you want to reach out to. But in terms of practical steps, obviously, as Mohammed has said, it's obviously like on your next projects, it'd be good to pitch to international broadcasters. And yeah, I mean, like the questions that they ask you, the feedback that they give you is obviously indicative of how you want, like what you're going, or how you're going to develop your projects. Because again, I think part of some of the issues that we have is that we don't take that development stage very, very seriously. And that's where a lot of the film is made, and in terms of the prospects of it and where it's going to, how it's going to raise finance, but also where it's going to live in terms of like where it's going to be distributed and where it's going to be shown. So and again, another practical step, particularly the documentary film festivals you went to, and you like the film did well, as you said, like it went like it's also easy for you to reach out to them and say, okay, can you do an introduction to so and so? Can you do an introduction to the commissioning editor of Al Jazeera, if they have that contact, or at least make that introduction for you so that you can continue that conversation. But what Mohammed said is absolutely right as well. Like, and which is why I asked you that question of if you're the producer or you're the filmmaker or the director, because that's admin work. It's a daily, it is a daily job, and it's oftentimes sometimes the most boring part of it, but then it's incredibly instrumental, because that is the only way that you're going to be able to have the money to make your film or even see any kind of returns on the film once it's made.
Okay, does anybody have any other comment? Hello, guys. Is there any other comment or contribution? A question? Okay, Ishaya, is there any, I think you've shared your slide. Is there any other thing you'd like to add? If there are no questions, I think you should help us wrap this up.
Oh, no, absolutely. And yes, it's great to see Mohammed again. And thank you so much for your contributions. I feel like you should have been the one to take this he's the legit OG in this.
A long time.
I know. I know I'm going to be pitching to you very soon too. So yes. But yeah, I mean, I hope this was very useful to everyone. Again, Stanley, thank you for putting this together.
Someone is asking if they can have the slides.
Oh yes. I'll send it to you so you can. Or should I just put it in here?
You can. So I'll give like 2 minutes after the chat ends for people to download, just in case people are not downloading fast. So.
Okay.
So Mohammed, I have one last question for you. You know what I was asking you the last time we were together, like all the grants and funds for Francophone speaking countries, many times they're extended to us. So can you just throw a little light on how those of us from Anglophone Africa can latch on to, like getting a co-producer from one of the Francophone countries like you? I already told you, so maybe the first on the list too. Like finding a Francophone a producer to take advantage of grants that are restricted, because most of the grants coming from France are targeted at filmmakers from French-speaking countries, especially French-speaking African countries. So can you just in like 3 minutes, just tell us the most walkable routes to get that done?
Yes. Right now, the way the mapping is happening on the continent, it's for documentary. It's something which is quite exciting. It has never happened before. There's a couple of institutions now doing grants. It's mainly in the French-speaking countries. So you have Jeune Création Francophone. I will write that down. Jeune Création Francophone. That's a grant. That's an institution that gives grant to mainly French-speaking African countries, 14 of them. But if you get a producer from those 14 countries, for example, Benin, Ivory Coast, Senegal, Togo, even neighboring countries from Nigeria, then you can be eligible. So that's interesting. We also have the OIF, which is the French International Organization, which is the equivalent of the Commonwealth. They have grants for cinema and audiovisual. It's been going on for 35 years, and now they have the backing of the EU. So they have much more money to give. They can double the grants. So, for example, you got 30,000 euros, you can double that or triple that. For example, can go up to 100,000, 200,000. So it's called ACP. It's for Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific countries. And so, guys, you can check on the OIF website. I will write that down as well, Stanley. So
okay.
one way to do that is really to look at countries that have a history of filmmaking in West Africa. For example, Senegal, Burkina Faso, Benin, and those are neighboring countries from Nigeria, to be honest. So it's easy to drop to Ouaga or to Cotonou or to Dakar and trying to get producers there and co-produce. Then you can access that market with, for example, Canal Plus, TV5 Monde, and all those broadcasters that are really big players on the documentary part. So those are really interesting way to venture. And I think those funds now, you can couple them, which wasn't something that was possible like 10, 15 years ago. So my advice for young producers in Nigeria, or for producers and filmmakers, documentary filmmakers, is trying to get producers. If they can't get them in Nigeria, get them in Benin, Ivory Coast, Senegal, Burkina Faso, and then you can access those markets those markets are used to documentary. So sometimes it's going to be easier for them.
Thanks, Mark.
I'll just write that down in the conversation.
Chat box.
Thank you, Mohammed. I didn't even know that. But that's very, especially like
we're all here to know new things.
they can double the grants. That's they can double or triple your grant.
I like the way that sounds, Ishaya.
No. Cameroon, that's and I think also just adding to that, and particularly people that are interested in social impact or impact producing in Nigeria, there is they call them the big three, or four actually. The Ford Foundation, the MacArthur and Osiwa. They have some grants. I'll type them in. They have some grants for documentaries in Nigeria, in Africa. And I think the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation too, but then they are very health focused. Again, like with these grants, especially from like international NGOs, it's always good to research them and see the kind of programmatic areas that they fund or the kind of interests that they have or they're in. And they also normally have like windows, but you see it on their website. So I'll put the organizations here, but you see it on their websites when their grants are open. But yeah, like these ones that Mohammed has said, it's also a very good thing to explore. And it's also just exploring co-production on the content. Very important.
Okay, so Mohammed has been gracious enough to put his email address there. So guys, fire his email, his mailbox with those mails straight up, man. Mohammed, that's a brave move. Why you see mail, you say retire. I know there's the Africa No Filter stuff going on. I think that should be wrapping up in a couple of days. So if you can just type in the chat box as well, Africa No Filter.
Africa No Filter, yes. Yes, thank you for that.
Africa. Okay, so I think it's been a very, very, very engaging and rewarding session. Having Mohammed here and having his email address, that's good. And having him make some of those remarks about being able to partner with producers from Francophone Africa. Because at the end of the day, I know when we were in France last month, there was one that came up and we were like, okay, let's do something together. But by the time we read through the whole process, they were not even giving the chance for someone from this part, like a Nigerian, to work with someone who's eligible from a French-speaking country. So that's why we didn't do that. So to hear that there are others that can make that happen, then yeah, I think it's something we should jump at because, of course, unlike our system, they have a lot of funds set aside for things like this. So guys, let's take advantage of this. So I'll leave the floor for Ishaya now, and I'll disable my video so that he's the spotlight, and then we can wrap the session.
Right. Mohammed, is Just Film still going on at 4? Because I thought they suspended it.
Yeah, Just Films at Ford Foundation, yes.
Okay.
Yes, Just Film at Ford Foundation. They give development money and they give production money and impact as well.
Fantastic.
And Doc Society as well, which is a UK organization. They do lots of impact program. If you finish a film, for example, for Esther, she could apply for an impact at with Doc Society. Maybe they can help her trying to get more exposure with the film and trying to capitalize on the film, for example. That could be a good way to go there. We're at Doc Society.
Yes. The Doc Society are the same people that do the Impact Field Guide. I think I put that earlier. Yeah, I put that link earlier on, and it's on the slides. So I think it's Kemi, yes? You go to the slides, it's the Doc Society is the last, they do the Impact Field Guide, and they're very cool, UK based.
And they have this thing called Good Pitch as well. that
Yes.
they do as well. We do that. We do a good pitch with them in Kenya. They have good pitch all over the place. So you can apply to good pitch.
Nigeria, run away. You know, you live here, you were supposed to come to Nigeria.
We try to organize that with Stanley. Let's try to do a good pitch in Nigeria.
Yeah, I know. That was the promise. Like I remember because it was just after Kenya that we spoke about it, and then it was like, when are you coming tonight?
Yeah.
Oh, we're coming. That's like 5 years ago. They're still coming.
We'll hook them up with Stanley so they can do a good pitch in Nigeria. That will be successful, I'm sure.
I think so too. I think it'll be great. Okay.
Thanks, Mohammed. So I guess even though the festival is coming to an end tomorrow, it doesn't mean we still can have this session. So Mohammed, just get ready. I'm going to put you in the spotlights maybe sometime next month, and we'll have one session.
It's really good to see you again, Mohammed.
Yeah,
it's so good to interact. And I thank you again, Stanley, for the invitation. And I think that's the idea of film festivals to begin with, anyways, is for you to share ideas, have these conversations and be open. For everybody out there that's doing this, please continue. But wants to be with you. More power to your elbow, more power to our hustle. But people just trying to start out or just starting a career, now is your chance to run away, to be honest. Because filmmaking is like a one chance. But if the bug has caught you, I think it's a very interesting and exciting time for filmmakers on the continent, in particular. And yeah, like trust yourself.
So we've allowed people to save the chats. I know in a lot of Zoom sessions they don't allow that, but we've allowed it so that you can just save everything that has been typed in there. Yes, so you can save everything and go and use them for your research right after. At least make the best use of the whole information as you put up.
Government.
That's great. Great. All right.
Okay, thanks, Ishaya. I really appreciate the time. Thanks, Mohammed, for joining us. Are you in Camas or you're still in France?
No. I'm in Comoros. I was supposed to go to Zanzibar, but then didn't make it. But I'm back home.
Okay, I told you you should come to a festival in Nigeria. If you had come, all this would be happening. So no wala. Okay. So thanks, guys. So I think the submission to the AMA, the African Movie Academy Award, is still on. So for those of us who have documentary projects that would like to submit, you can submit to the AMA Awards on Film Freeway. Let me see if I can just copy and paste the link so you can go there straight up and submit your movie before the submission deadline is over. Okay, yeah, I got it. So there we go, chat. And to everyone in the meeting. And okay, so that's the submission link to the AMA Awards. So please, everybody, just take your time, submit your movies. Like we say in Nigeria, if it be you. Thank you, everybody, and God bless. We'll be having the closing ceremony for the Real Time International Film Festival tomorrow at the Silverbed Cinemas, Amado Bello Way, VI. The red carpet starts by 3 p.m. The main event starts by 5 p.m. And we are not doing African time. So if you're coming, come on time. And as we know, we have the 20-hour filmmaking challenge that happens at the festival. And so all the movies that will be shown at the closing ceremony are films that were made within 20 hours during this year's edition of the festival. So guys, we look forward to seeing you there tomorrow. Come with your mask and come ready to have some fun. Thank you, everybody. And I'll leave Ishaya to make the closing remark before I end the session.
Many closing remarks I won't make now, Stanley.
Just talk bye-bye now. It's all for you.
All right, everybody, thank you again. This has been a really good and insightful session. I hope it's been the same for everyone else. Well done to Stanley and the Real Time Festival team. And thank you, Mohammed, again. Hope you have a good weekend, the rest of the weekend. Goodbye.
Thank you, everybody. So I'll leave the chat active I'll still leave the meeting for like 2 minutes so people can save the chat. And right after that, we'll end the session. Mohammed, I'm calling you right after this. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Do you save chat? I screen grab them though. That's all I did.
I was thinking they're talking saving the video. The video shot. Is nothing popping out here.
So I'm ending the session now. Don't forget, we're still showing films at the portal, the Real Time Film Festival. So if you want to see the movies that are showing at the festival, just log on to the portal and see the movies. So from tonight, we'll have all the movies that have shown from the opening ceremony up till today, and then the ones for tomorrow. So we'll be leaving the movies on the portal for 2 days after the festival ends, so people can go back there and see them. So I think that's the best we can do. So thank you, everybody. I've posted the link to see the movies in case you want to go there right away. And we are shutting this down in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Click on that link now. 2, 1, and